Hi everyone. So our first learning unit is called an Introduction to Biochemistry, and it's really going through the fundamentals that we need to have in order to be productive in our discussions moving forward. So it's going to kind of seem like there's stuff all over the place that we're talking about, but it really is kind of a grab bag of different things that we need to make sure that everybody understands well so that we can move on and put them in the context of some biochemical applications. So probably about 5 to 6 lectures that we'll have here. It'll include a really neat case study that will talk about what happens when someone overdoses on aspirin, that will kind of pull things all together. But I wanted to just take about 2-3 minutes here and give you kind of the broad strokes overview of some of the topics that we're going to be talking about. So we'll begin with talking about and introducing reaction mechanisms, again, to make sure that everybody understands how to do them well and understand how we need to be able to think about them, because we will use them as we think about how enzymes do their chemistry. So that's why reaction mechanisms are really important. So that's kind of an organic chemistry skill, and most of the chemistry is going to be based on carbonyl containing functional groups. So if you need to review something from organic chemistry, that's probably what you should think about. We'll move on from there and we'll study some acid-base chemistry, so thinking about pH and pKa and buffers, particularly as it relates to how blood buffering occurs in your body. So some things to review for there include functional groups and pKa's of some common functional groups. So only about 5 that you'll need to think about, and again, we've got some flashcards available online that you can utilize to review those. Also thinking about things to review from organic chemistry include functional groups. So flashcards are available again online to be able to review the functional groups that you need to know. And again, for some of those where it's relevant, to think about the pKa of those relevant functional groups. We also are going to start introducing and studying with our flashcards early and often our 20 amino acid structures. We won't get a chance to put them into context for a few more chapters, but it is important that by the time we get there, we have a working knowledge of not only their names, but what functional groups are there and what kind of chemical reactivity they might be able to utilize. So beyond kind of those nuts and bolts of chemical reactivity and then structure, we'll move on to talk about energy. And so we'll spend a little bit of time talking about thermodynamics, kinetics, equilibrium, thinking about reaction coordinates, and then energy when we think about intermolecular forces that kind of hold molecules together. So we'll kind of relate that to solubility. And then we'll kind of close out with, I kind of call it a this or that lecture, or this versus that lecture, because we'll talk about different things like what's the difference between taxonomy and phylogeny, what's the difference between osmosis and diffusion, what's the difference between a eukaryotic and a prokaryotic cell. So kind of just some random things that it's important for us to kind of have a context to understand them in the future, so we need to understand the basics right now. So that's really what it's going to be for the first chapter here. Not a lot of parallel to what you see in the textbook, so use the textbook more as sort of a reference than anything particular. Use lecture notes as your primary source of content information. And that's what we'll cover in our first learning unit.